After my buddy left, I walked into the kitchen and said to my wife, "Sit down. We need to talk." Those 8 words changed the course of my life. My name is David, and what I uncovered that evening didn't just end my marriage. It broke apart everything I believed I knew about the woman I had loved for 15 years. But before I reveal how it all fell apart, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell, because this story is filled with twists you won't expect, and you won't want to miss what's coming. Let me take you back to where it all started. Sarah and I first crossed paths during our sophomore year at State University. I was buried under accounting books in the library when an incredible woman with paint-stained fingers and wild curly hair asked if she could share my table. She was studying art, preparing her master's thesis on emotional landscapes. I was instantly drawn in, not just by her beauty, but by her unique way of seeing the world. While I focused on logic and numbers, she saw feelings and colors in everything. Our first date lasted 14 hours straight. We began with coffee at 2 p.m. and ended by watching the sunrise from the campus bell tower, talking about everything under the stars. She told me about her childhood in a rural farming town where her dream of being an artist was brushed off as unrealistic. I shared my own story, my family's plan for me to eventually run their accounting firm. We were complete opposites, but that was exactly what made us perfect together. We tied the knot right after graduation in a small ceremony at her parents' barn. The reception felt magical. Sarah had painted giant canvases as backdrops, with fairy lights strung everywhere. Her wedding dress had tiny paint marks from a last-minute touch-up earlier that morning. To me, it was the most beautiful sight I had ever seen. For 15 years, I thought we were building an unshakable life together. We purchased a lovely Victorian home on Maple Street, with wide windows that Sarah said would bring in perfect daylight. We converted the detached garage into her dream art studio, complete with skylights and shelves for all her canvases and supplies. Our life settled into a routine that felt peaceful and fulfilling. Every morning, at 7:30, I'd leave for the accounting firm, kissing Sarah goodbye as she stood in her paint-splattered robe, already planning her creative day. By 6 p.m., I'd come home to find her either lost in her studio or experimenting with recipes in the kitchen. She'd welcome me with that radiant smile, paint streaked in her hair, and we'd cook dinner side by side, sharing stories about work, dreams, and our plans. Over time, Sarah built a strong reputation as a local artist. Her specialty was large landscape paintings that somehow expressed not just how places looked, but how they felt. She had a loyal client base, interior designers, businesses, and even wealthy collectors who commissioned pieces for their homes. Her art appeared in regional galleries, and she won several local awards. She always stayed private about her clients, but I respected that. Artists and patrons have delicate relationships. She'd explain whenever I asked. These people open their homes and hearts to my work. They don't want their lives talked about casually at dinner. It seemed reasonable, and I trusted her without question. But now, looking back, I realized that trust had blinded me. The changes began so slowly I hardly noticed them. About 10 months ago, Sarah started getting more phone calls in the evenings. At first, it happened rarely, maybe once a week. She'd glance at the screen, give me an apologetic smile, and step into another room. "Sorry, honey," she'd say when she came back. "You know how demanding clients can be. This businessman I'm working with wants a whole series for his company's headquarters. He's picky about every detail." The calls came more often. Then came the text messages during dinner. something that had never once happened. In our marriage, her phone would buzz. She'd quickly flip it over and give that same guilty smile. He's just very involved in the process, she'd explain. He needs constant updates. I know it's annoying, but this commission could be a huge boost for my career. I also began noticing other subtle shifts. Sarah started staying in her studio much later than before, where she used to finish by 7 or 8 p.m., she was suddenly working until 10, sometimes 11 at night. When she'd finally come inside, her hands were smeared with fresh paint, her clothes covered in colors. Lost track of time again, she'd laugh. Straight into the shower. You know how I get when I'm in the zone, she'd say. But something about these late-night sessions felt off. Sarah had always been driven about her art, but now there was a spark, a thrill that seemed to have little to do with painting. Then came the wardrobe changes. For years, Sarah lived in jeans and soft sweaters, the kind of clothes that could be ruined with paint without worry. But suddenly, she was buying new outfits, dresses that clung to her body, heels she claimed were for networking events, lingerie, far more elaborate than anything she'd worn in ages. I'm just trying to look more professional, she'd explain when I asked. This big client has connections. There might be gallery shows or art events. I need to look the part. Yet, those gallery openings never happened. Those networking events were never spoken of again. Then came the trips. Around 6 months ago. In 15 years, Sarah had never once traveled for her career. Her clients always came to her. But now, she was packing for overnight stays. He's got offices in different cities, she'd explain, carefully folding clothes into her suitcase. He wants to see how each piece fits into the spaces before making final choices. Always overnight. Always alone. Always just far enough away to require a hotel, but close enough she could claim it was a late-day trip. It was my best friend Marcus who first voiced what I was terrified to face. We'd been close since college. He'd even stood beside me as best man at my wedding. He liked Sarah, but he valued our friendship more. One Thursday at Murphy's Tavern, over our usual beers, he leaned in and asked, "Dave, when's the last time you actually saw one of Sarah's new paintings?" I opened my mouth, then froze. I couldn't remember. When had I last stepped into her studio? When had she last shown me a finished canvas or asked my opinion? She used to light up sharing her process, her inspirations, her struggles. She wants to surprise me with this big commission. I answered weakly. She's keeping it under wraps until it's finished. Marcus nodded slowly, but his eyes told another story. And these business trips, have you ever met this client? Spoken to him on the phone? I hadn't. In all our years, I'd met nearly every patron Sarah worked with. I'd helped deliver pieces, clapped at gallery openings, toasted her big sales. But this so-called businessman, the one supposedly shaping her career, remained invisible. Drop by the studio sometime, Marcus suggested. Surprise her. Bring lunch. That talk planted a seed, and before long, it grew into something darker. I started noticing what I had brushed aside for months. Credit card charges at fancy restaurants in nearby cities, always during her business trips. A new perfume she wore, rich, seductive, nothing like her usual soft floral. Most telling was her routine when she returned. Head straight for the shower, even if she'd supposedly just been at meetings. She carried an odd mix of energy and distraction, like her body was home but her mind was elsewhere. The phone became her lifeline. Once, she could leave it on the charger for hours. Now, it never left her side, not for the mail, not for walking Pepper, not even for the bathroom. And then came the laughter. Late at night, when she thought I was asleep, I'd hear her whispering in the bathroom or on the back porch. Not the warm laughter I knew, but something different, playful, flirty, intimate in a way that twisted my stomach. The breaking point came 3 weeks ago. On a Tuesday night. Sarah had spent the afternoon in the studio, and around 6, she drifted into the kitchen to start dinner. She was distracted, even giddy, humming as she chopped vegetables. Her phone sat charging on the counter when she said she'd shower quickly before we ate. Got paint in my hair, she said, though I hadn't noticed any. That's when it buzzed. A message lit up. The lock screen, visible for only a few seconds before fading. Asterisk, can't wait to see you tonight. Beautiful. Same hotel as last time. Asterisk. With trembling hands, I snapped a photo of the screen on my own phone before it disappeared. Wasn't a demanding art patron, not a gallery curator, not even a business associate. It was someone booking hotel rooms to meet my wife. Someone who called her beautiful. Someone who, judging by the casual wording, had done this more than once. I sat frozen at the kitchen table, staring at the photo on my phone. Minutes dragged by like hours as I tried to convince myself there was another explanation. Maybe it was the wrong number. Maybe a friend's joke. Maybe something harmless I was misreading. But deep down, I knew. I'd known for months. And I had just been too afraid to face the truth. When Sarah came back downstairs, she wasn't wearing the paint-stained clothes from earlier. She had changed into one of her new dresses, heels clicking on the tile. I knew exactly where she was headed. I need to deliver a painting to a client tonight, she said, not meeting my eyes as she picked up her purse and an overnight bag. He's leaving town tomorrow morning, so it has to be tonight. Don't wait up. She kissed me on the cheek, a distracted peck, and reached for the door. Which client? I asked. Her hand froze on the knob. The businessman, she answered. The one with the corporate offices. What's his name? Another pause. Richard, she finally said. Richard Morrison. After she left, I did something I never thought I'd do. I got into my car and followed her. Sarah drove not toward any business park, but to the downtown Marriott, the nicest hotel in our city. I parked across the street in the garage, pulled out the binoculars I'd once bought for birdwatching, and waited. She walked into the lobby with her overnight bag. No paintings, no supplies, nothing for a client. 25 minutes later, a sleek black BMW rolled into the valet. The man who stepped out was tall, mid-40s, dark hair, shot with silver, dressed in an expensive suit. He carried himself with the kind of confidence that made it clear he was used to being the most important man in the room. He handed off his keys and strolled into the same hotel Sarah had entered. I sat in that garage until 2 a.m., but neither of them came out. The next day was agony. I went through the motions at the office, but every spreadsheet looked like nonsense. Every meeting felt like background noise. My mind replayed the same image, Sarah and Richard Morrison together in room 412. When she came home the following evening, she acted as if nothing had happened. She chatted about her studio work, asked how my day went, even talked about planting tomatoes this spring. She was either an incredible actress or had completely compartmentalized her double life. That night, Marcus came by for dinner. Like he often did. Sarah made her signature lasagna, opened a nice bottle of wine, and laughed at his stories about his quirky co-workers. She was charming, warm, the perfect wife on display. Watching her put on this performance, knowing what I knew, felt surreal. This was the same woman who held my hand through my mother's battle with cancer, who whisked me away on a mountain trip For our 10th anniversary, who still tucked little love notes in my lunch bag. How long had she been living a second life? How many hotel rooms? How many lies told right to my face? After Marcus left, I stood in the kitchen. We had shared thousands of meals in the place where we once dreamed aloud about having children, where we planned our future together. I watched Sarah load the dishwasher, humming softly the same tune she'd hummed on our honeymoon in Italy 15 years ago. For a moment, I almost let myself believe everything was normal. That maybe I had imagined the message. That there was some explanation. Then her phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at it, and I caught the look. That secretive smile. That glow of anticipation that had nothing to do with me. That's when I knew, with crushing certainty, that the woman I had married, the woman I had built my life around, was in love with another man. And I was the only fool still playing by rules she'd abandoned long ago. Sarah, I said quietly, though my voice shook less than I expected. Sit down. We need to talk. The change in her face was instant. Not confusion. Not curiosity. Guilt. Raw, undeniable guilt. The kind of look that only comes when someone realizes they've been caught. What do you mean? She asked, but her voice trembled. She already knew. I pulled out my phone and showed her the photo of the text. Her shoulders slumped. Her hand gripped the counter like she was drowning. For several long minutes, we just stared at one another. 15 years of marriage, reduced to silence between two strangers. How long? I asked. Slowly, she sank into the chair across from me, moving as if the air itself was heavy. When she finally spoke, her words came out in a whisper. 10 months. While I was bringing her coffee every morning and asking about her day, she'd been arranging secret meetings with another man. While I planned destinations for our anniversary trip, she was booking hotel rooms with someone else. Who is he? I asked. His name is Richard Morrison, she said. Hearing his name spoken aloud made it undeniable. He owns Morrison Development, a company that builds high-end condos. He first came to her studio about 8 months ago, looking to commission artwork for one of his new projects. She explained it in fragments, like pulling splinters from a wound. Richard had shown up professional, recently divorced, polished, and confident. Their business discussion turned into lunch. Lunch led to dinner. Dinner slid into late drinks at his hotel. It just happened, David, she said. But the way she described it, I could hear the planning behind it all. The so-called business trips weren't spur of the moment. They were coordinated around Richard's travel. The locked studio wasn't hiding paintings, it was where they sometimes met when hotels weren't an option. She had built 2 separate lives with the precision of a spy. Do you love him? I forced the question, though the pause before her answer told me enough. I don't know, she whispered. But her eyes betrayed her. They said, yes, I love you. But with Richard, it's something different. He makes me feel alive in a way I'd forgotten. We talked until dawn, voices breaking, accusations flung, both of us searching for scraps of hope that our marriage could somehow survive this fracture. But some breaks never mend. Some trust, once lost, is gone forever. Sarah moved out the following weekend. She took her clothes, her brushes, her canvases, and left me with memories that suddenly felt like carefully constructed lies. 6 weeks later, divorce papers arrived. But the story didn't stop there. Because life has its own way of evening the scales. 3 months after Sarah left, I got a call from the last person I expected, Margaret, Richard's ex-wife. She'd heard about my divorce and wanted to meet. Over coffee, 2 strangers connected by betrayal, she told me the rest of the story. Richard was a serial adulterer. Sarah wasn't his first affair, she was just the latest in a long string of married women he'd targeted. Margaret had divorced him 2 years earlier after uncovering at least 5 other affairs. His pattern was always the same: find a vulnerable woman who worked independently, an artist, a realtor, a designer, someone with freedom in her schedule. Approach with legitimate business, smother with charm and expensive dinners, then draw her in until she believed she was his true love. The affairs lasted anywhere from months to a couple of years. And when Richard grew restless, or things became too complicated, he cut them off without a word, blocked numbers, cancelled accounts, sometimes even moving his office to another city. He collects married women like trophies, Margaret told me bitterly. It's not just about seducing them. It's about wrecking their marriages. That's what gives him power. And just as she predicted, Sarah's fairy tale ended abruptly. For months after our divorce finalized, Richard's current wife, his third, discovered the affair. Unlike me, Linda Morrison was ruthless. She threatened to destroy his reputation, expose his personal life, and jeopardize his company. Richard didn't hesitate. He cut Sarah off overnight. No call. No explanation. Not even a goodbye. One day, she was imagining their future. The next, she was erased from his life. She tried everything: calls, emails, even showing up at his office. His secretary, following orders, told her that Mr. Morrison was indefinitely unavailable, and further contact would not be tolerated. The last I heard of Sarah, she was renting a cramped studio in a run-down part of town, waiting tables just to survive. Her art career had collapsed. Word about the scandal spread quickly. Clients distanced themselves. Galleries quietly pulled her work from shows. The art community that once celebrated her froze her out. She'd gambled everything: our marriage, her reputation, her livelihood, on a man who never saw her as more than a conquest. As for me, I'm rebuilding, piece by piece. Some days still cut deep. Sometimes I catch myself seeing a painting in a gallery window and instinctively think of telling her. Sometimes I still reach for her in the night. But I've discovered resilience I never knew I had. I started hiking, something she never enjoyed. I joined a book club, made new friends, and even begun dating again, slowly, carefully, but with hope. I've learned betrayal doesn't have to be the end of your story. It can mark the beginning of a stronger chapter, one where you recognize red flags sooner, guard your worth more fiercely, and choose more carefully who you allow close. And I've learned something else: the person you trust most can carry the deepest secrets. But even when the life you knew is shattered, you can survive, and eventually, thrive. The house on Maple Street is no longer mine. A young couple lives there now, their baby's toys scattered across the lawn, the shutters freshly painted. I drive by sometimes. And though that house witnessed the collapse of my old life, it also reminds me of something else. Life goes on, new beginnings grow from the ruins, and so will I.